The door slammed in Evelyn Mercer's face with such force that splinters of paint flaked onto her worn boots. Behind her, three small boys pressed against her skirts as February wind cut through the Colorado twilight. Her brother-in-law's final words still hung in the air like poison. Thomas's mistakes died with him. You're not my problem. $20 remained in her pocket. No room at the boarding house. No family. No plan. And storm clouds gathering like fists over Willow Creek's main street, promising a night that could kill them all if she chose wrong in the next hour. Welcome to a story of survival, second chances, and the unexpected grace found when pride meets desperation on the 1879 frontier. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey reaches. The general store's lamplight spilled across the boardwalk in pale yellow squares, the only warmth Evelyn could offer her sons as they huddled against the building's western wall. She'd positioned them there deliberately, out of the wind, visible to passers-by, close enough to the door that if someone charitable emerged, they might take notice. Caleb, 8 years old and already carrying Thomas's serious eyes, kept his arms around his younger brothers. Nate, 6, had stopped asking questions an hour ago. Toby, barely 4, simply tucked his face into Caleb's shoulder and shivered. Evelyn stood apart, scanning the darkening street with the practiced assessment of a woman who'd learned to read danger in the shift of light and the smell of weather. The boarding house had turned them away. Full up, the pinch-faced proprietor claimed, though Evelyn had seen empty windows on the second floor. The church was locked, its minister apparently away until Sunday, and her late husband's brother, the man she'd traveled 300 miles to reach, had made his position brutally clear. Thomas's mistakes. The words burned worse than the wind, as if loving her had been Thomas's greatest failure, as if their sons, beautiful, bright boys who deserved so much more than this moment, were evidence of poor judgment rather than proof of the good man he'd been. She pulled her shawl tighter, though it did nothing against the cold that had nothing to do with temperature. In her pocket, folded carefully against the $20 bill that represented their entire future, was the letter Thomas had written 2 years before his accident. In it, he described his brother Samuel with cautious optimism. Not a warm man, but fair. If anything happens to me, Evie, he'll see you right. Thomas had been wrong about many things in their marriage. His ability to provide, his prospects in the Montana mining camps, his health strong enough to survive another winter. But he'd been sincerely wrong, which somehow made it worse. He truly believed his brother would help. Mama? Caleb's voice was quiet, careful. That man's looking at us. Evelyn followed her son's gaze across the street, where a tall figure stood motionless outside the land office. Even in the failing light, she could see he was watching them, not with the curiosity of a stranger, but with the focused attention of someone making calculations. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin. Whatever he saw, he wouldn't see desperation. She'd learned that much in the mining camps: show weakness, and men either tried to save you or devour you, and sometimes those looked exactly the same. The man crossed the street with the easy stride of someone who owned his place in the world. As he stepped into the store's lamplight, Evelyn revised her first impression. Not tall, though he had height, but substantial. Broad through the shoulders, wearing work clothes that had seen honest use, a hat pulled low enough that shadows hid most of his face. Weathered hands, quiet boots, the kind of man who moved through the world without announcing himself. "Evening," he said, his voice like gravel smoothed by water. He didn't tip his hat. Both hands stayed loose at his sides, unthreatening. "Storm's coming in hard. You folks got shelter?" "We're managing," Evelyn said, the lie automatic and unconvincing even to her own ears. The man's eyes, she could see them now, dark and steady, shifted to the boys, then back to her. "Respectfully, ma'am, you're not. Boarding house is full, church is locked, and that storm's going to drop snow and temperature both before midnight. We'll find something." "There's nothing to find." No judgment in his voice, just fact. "I'm Cole Granger. I run the Lazy G Ranch, about 3 miles northeast. Got an empty foreman's cabin, good roof, working stove, beds enough for your boys. You're welcome to it tonight, and we can sort out tomorrow when tomorrow comes." Every instinct Evelyn had learned in 10 years of marriage screamed warnings, Strange men offering shelter, isolated ranches, her son's safety dependent on a stranger's goodwill. But competing against those warnings was the simple, terrible arithmetic of survival. 3 small boys dropping temperature, no alternatives. And what would you want in exchange? She kept her voice level, made sure he understood she was asking the question directly. Something shifted in Cole Granger's expression. Not offense, but a kind of tired recognition, as if he'd expected the question and found it depressing anyway. Nothing tonight. You'd be doing me a favor, actually. Cabin's been empty since my foreman moved on, and empty buildings deteriorate faster than occupied ones. Tomorrow, if you're interested, we can talk about work. I need household help, and if you can read and write, there's teaching work for the ranch family's children. But tonight? Just trying to keep folks from freezing to death on Willow Creek's Main Street. Bad for the town's reputation. The last sentence carried the smallest hint of dry humor, and somehow that decided it for Evelyn. A man trying to manipulate would have been earnest, reassuring, full of promises. This one just sounded tired and practical. "Caleb," she said quietly, "gather your brothers." The wagon ride to the Lazy G passed in near silence, broken only by the creak of wheels and the first spattering of sleet against the canvas cover Cole had pulled over them. The boys huddled together in the wagon bed, exhausted enough that even the jolting ride couldn't keep them fully awake. Evelyn sat on the bench beside Cole, maintaining a careful distance, watching the darkness beyond the reach of the wagon's lantern. "Your husband passed?" Cole asked after the first mile, his voice pitched low enough not to carry to the boys. 6 months ago, mining accident in Montana. Evelyn kept her own voice equally quiet. "We'd planned to move to Denver, start fresh, but after he died, I couldn't stay in those camps. His brother was supposed to be here. Family. Samuel Mercer." Not a question. "You know him?" "Know of him. He's got a reputation for being exactly what you found tonight." Cole shifted the reins slightly as the horses leaned into a climb. "Town tolerates him because he pays his bills, but nobody mistakes him for charitable. I'm sorry you came all this way for that." The simple acknowledgement, free of pity or advice, loosened something in Evelyn's chest. "How did you know we were family? Could have been anything." "You were standing outside the general store with 3 boys, $20, and no plan. That's not anything. That's everything just fell apart. And the way you were watching the street, you weren't looking for help. You were calculating survival. Figured you'd run out of options, not started without them." Evelyn turned to look at him directly for the first time. In the lantern light, she could see more of his face, maybe 40, lines around his eyes that suggested squinting into sun and wind, a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in a few days. Not handsome in any conventional sense, but solid, present. "Why help us?" she asked. "Truth." Cole was quiet for a long moment, his attention apparently focused on guiding the horses around a washout in the road. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something that wasn't quite emotion but wasn't entirely absent of it either. 8 years ago, I needed help I didn't know how to ask for. Someone offered it anyway, didn't make a thing of it, just did what needed doing. Figure I owe that forward." He glanced at her briefly. "Also, I wasn't lying about the cabin deteriorating, and I do need household help. But mostly, couldn't walk past 3 kids about to spend a bad night in a worse place and pretend I didn't see it." The ranch appeared gradually, first the fence lines, then the dark shapes of outbuildings. Finally, the main house itself, substantial and well-kept, lamplight glowing in several windows. Cole guided the wagon past the main house to a smaller structure set back among a stand of pine trees. "Foreman's cabin," he said, climbing down. "Give me a minute to get the stove going." He disappeared inside while Evelyn helped the boys down from the wagon. They stood in a small cluster, Toby clinging to her skirts, all of them too tired and overwhelmed to do more than wait. Through the cabin's open door, she could see Cole moving efficiently, lighting lamps, feeding kindling into a stove, adjusting dampers. "All right," he called after a few minutes. "Should be warming up shortly." The cabin was simple but solid. One main room with a cooking area, a separate small bedroom, everything clean and bare. Cole had already pulled blankets from a chest and laid them across 2 narrow beds. "Boys can take the bedroom," he said. "You can have the main room. There's a bolt on the inside of the door, and I'll be in the main house. About 100 yards that direction. He pointed. Mrs. Whitlow, my housekeeper, will come by first thing with breakfast. She'll knock loud, so don't worry about oversleeping. Evelyn nodded, trying to process the swift change in their circumstances. 6 hours ago, they'd been standing outside Samuel's door. Now they had shelter, heat, the promise of breakfast. It felt surreal. Mr. Granger, she began, but he shook his head. Cole. And you don't need to thank me tonight. Get your boys warm and fed. Tomorrow we'll talk about the rest. He moved toward the door, then paused. There's a well outside with good water. Outhouse is behind the cabin. If you need anything urgent, there's a bell on the porch. Ring it and someone will come. But you should be fine until morning. After he left, Evelyn stood in the center of the cabin, listening to the stove tick as it heated, feeling warmth begin to push back against the cold. Behind her, the boys had already claimed the bedroom, their voices soft with wonder at having beds again. She walked to the small window, looking out toward the main house where lamplight still glowed. Cole Granger's silhouette passed briefly across one of the windows. There, then gone. Mama? Caleb appeared at her elbow, worry creasing his young face. Are we staying? Evelyn put her hand on her son's shoulder, feeling the sharp bones that shouldn't be quite so prominent, evidence of too many meals stretched too thin. I don't know yet, sweetheart, but we're safe tonight, and that's enough for now. Morning arrived with 3 sharp knocks and a woman's brisk voice. Mrs. Mercer, I'm Alma Whitlow. Got breakfast here, and it's getting cold. Evelyn, who'd been awake since first light, hurried to open the door. The woman on the porch was perhaps 60, built solid, with steel-gray hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun, and eyes that assessed everything in a single sweep. Boys still sleeping? Mrs. Whitlow didn't wait for an answer, just pushed past with a covered basket that smelled of bacon and fresh bread. Good. Let them rest. You and I need to talk before Cole gets back from the north pasture. She set the basket on the small table, began unpacking with efficient movements. Plates, cloth napkins, jars of preserves, a pot of coffee still steaming. Sit, she commanded, and Evelyn found herself obeying before she'd consciously decided to. Mrs. Whitlow poured 2 cups of coffee, pushed one across the table, and settled into the opposite chair with the air of someone prepared to conduct an interrogation. Cole told me your situation. Husband dead, brother-in-law's a bastard, pardon my language, 3 boys and $20 between you and the poorhouse. That about cover it? Yes. Evelyn wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, grateful for its warmth. Good. I appreciate a woman who doesn't waste time on pride when facts need sorting. Mrs. Whitlow sipped her coffee, watching Evelyn over the rim. Here's what you need to know about Cole Granger. He's fair, he's honest, and he's got a tendency to help people who need helping. But he's not a charity operation, and he won't respect you if you try to play helpless. You want to stay here, you work. Understood? Understood. Can you cook? Yes. Clean? Yes. Sew, mend, manage a household? I've done all of those. Mrs. Whitlow nodded slowly, some calculation happening behind her sharp eyes. Cole mentioned you can read and write. That true? Or was he being optimistic? I taught school before I married, 3 years in Ohio. Well, Mrs. Whitlow sat back, something like satisfaction crossing her features. That changes things. We've got 6 ranch families with children. Youngest is 5, oldest is 12. They need teaching, and the nearest school is in Willow Creek, too far for daily travel in winter. You could teach them here, 3 days a week. Cole would pay you fair wages, same as he'd pay any teacher. Evelyn felt her heart rate accelerate. He's offering me a job? I'm offering you a job, and Cole will agree because it solves a problem he's been trying to fix for 2 years. Mrs. Whitlow leaned forward. But understand this, Mrs. Mercer. This isn't charity. You'll work for your wages. You'll teach those children properly. And you'll contribute to this household in other ways too, helping with meals, mending, whatever needs doing. In exchange, you and your boys get this cabin, wages enough to save, and a place in this community if you want it, but you earn it. Clear? Clear. Evelyn met the older woman's eyes directly. And yes, I want the work. Good. Mrs. Whitlow stood, gathering the empty basket. Boys will want feeding when they wake. There's enough here for all of you. Cole will be back around noon to discuss particulars, wages, schedule, expectations. Until then, settle in, get your bearings. This is your home now, at least for as long as you make it work. After she left, Evelyn sat alone in the warming cabin, listening to her sons begin to stir in the bedroom. Through the window, she could see the lazy G spreading out in morning light, pastures, outbuildings, the solid presence of the main house. Not charity, not rescue, work and wages and dignity. For the first time since Thomas died, she felt something other than the grinding necessity of survival. She felt possibility. Cole returned just after noon, as promised, riding a bay gelding that looked as practical and well-kept as everything else on the ranch. He swung down with the easy movement of a man who spent most of his life in the saddle, tied the horse to the porch rail, and knocked once before entering. "Mrs. Whitlow told me you talked," he said without preamble. "You interested in the teaching position?" "Yes." Evelyn had prepared a speech about gratitude and commitment, but Cole's directness made the prepared words seem unnecessary. "All right, here's what I'm thinking. 3 days a week teaching, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. School runs from 8 until 2 with a break for lunch. You'll teach reading, writing, arithmetic, whatever else you think they need. I'll provide all supplies. Wages are $30 a month." $30. Evelyn kept her face composed, but the number hit hard. In the mining camps, she'd struggled to make $10 last a month. "In addition," Cole continued, "you'll help Mrs. Whitlow with household tasks on your non-teaching days, cooking, mending, general work. That's another $20 a month, so $50 total, plus this cabin at no cost, plus provisions from the ranch stores, flour, meat, milk, whatever you need for yourself and the boys." $50 a month. Evelyn did the mathematics automatically. In 6 months, she could save enough to have real choices. In a year, she could be independent. "There's one more thing," Cole said, and something in his tone made Evelyn look up sharply. "Your boys. Caleb's 8? "Yes. Old enough to work if he wants to. Not hard labor, but light ranch work. Helping with chickens, collecting eggs, feeding stock. I'd pay him $5 a month, same as I pay the other boys who help around here. Nate's probably too young yet, but in a year or two, same offer stands for him." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. He was offering Caleb dignity, a chance to contribute, to be more than the charity case. "He'd like that," she managed. "Thank you." "It's not charity," Cole said quietly. "I need the help, and he'll earn every penny, but I want you to know, your boys are welcome here, all of them. They can play, go to school when you start teaching, just be children. But if Caleb wants to work, he can work. His choice." "I understand." Cole nodded once, apparently satisfied. "Mrs. Whitlow will get you set up with everything you need for teaching. First class starts Monday, so you've got a few days to prepare. Any questions?" Evelyn had 1,000 questions about expectations, about boundaries, about what happened if she failed, if this didn't work, if she proved insufficient to the trust he was placing in her. But looking at Cole's steady, patient expression, she understood that he'd already calculated those risks and decided to take them anyway. "No questions," she said, "just thank you for all of it." "You're welcome." He moved toward the door, then paused. "One last thing, Mrs. Mercer. You're safe here. Whatever you're worried about, and I can see you're worried, you're safe. This is a working ranch with good people on it. Nobody's going to bother you or your boys, and if anyone tries, you come to me. Understood?" Evelyn nodded, not trusting her voice. After he left, she stood at the window watching him ride back toward the main house, his silhouette dark against the winter-pale grass. Behind her, the boys were exploring the cabin with renewed energy, their voices bright with the particular joy of children who'd been afraid and were afraid no longer. She thought about Thomas, about the letter in her pocket describing a brother who would see her right. Thomas had been wrong about Samuel, but somehow, in being wrong, in forcing her to this desperate journey, he'd brought her here. To this cabin, this ranch, this unexpected second chance. "Mama," Toby called from the bedroom. "There's a bird nest in the eaves. Can we keep it?" "We'll see," Evelyn called back and felt herself smile for the first time in longer than she could remember. The first week passed in a blur of activity and adjustment. Mrs. Whitlow proved to be exactly what she appeared: efficient, fair, and utterly intolerant of laziness or self-pity. She put Evelyn to work immediately, teaching her the rhythms of the ranch household, the preferences of the hands who took meals in the main house, the particular requirements of Cole's quiet, ordered life. Man likes his coffee strong, his meals on time, and his house peaceful, Mrs. Whitlow explained as they worked together in the main house kitchen, preparing dinner for the ranch hands. He's not fussy, but he appreciates things done right, and he notices when they're not. Evelyn learned quickly. She learned that the ranch ran on a precise schedule: breakfast at dawn, dinner at noon, supper at sunset. She learned the names and faces of the ranch hands: Old Joe, the graying cowboy who'd been with Cole for 20 years, Marcus and James, brothers from Kansas who handled the cattle, young Pete, barely 16 but already strong as an ox. She learned that Cole took his meals with the hands most days, sitting at the long table in the kitchen, listening more than he talked. And she learned that the Lazy G was more than just a ranch. It was a community. The families Mrs. Whitlow had mentioned lived in small houses scattered across the property. The Hendersons with 3 children, the Cartwrights with 4, the Daltons with 2. All of them employees, all of them dependent on the ranch's success, all of them treating Cole with a respect that seemed earned rather than demanded. On Friday, 3 days before her first teaching session, Evelyn walked to each family's home to introduce herself and assess the children's current education. What she found was both encouraging and challenging. Bright children, eager to learn, but wildly varied in their abilities. The oldest Henderson boy could read at a 7th grade level. The youngest Cartwright couldn't recognize letters. "You've got your work cut out for you," Mrs. Henderson said with a sympathetic smile. "But we're grateful for the opportunity. These children need proper education if they're going to have choices in life." That evening, Evelyn sat at the small table in her cabin, working by lamplight to create a teaching plan that could accommodate such varied abilities. Caleb sat across from her, practicing his own letters. His father had taught him to read, but his writing needed work. Nate and Toby were already asleep, worn out from a day spent exploring the ranch under Old Joe's tolerant supervision. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Cole standing in the winter darkness, a wooden crate in his arms. "Books," he said simply. "For the school. Mrs. Whitlow said you'd need them." He set the crate inside, and Evelyn knelt beside it, examining the contents with wonder. McGuffey readers, arithmetic primers, a worn copy of Robinson Crusoe, geography texts, even a small globe. "Where did these come from?" she asked. Cole shrugged. "Been collecting them for a few years, thinking eventually we'd get a teacher out here. Some I bought, some I traded for, some were donated by families in town. Use whatever helps." Evelyn lifted the geography text, feeling its weight, its promise. "This is generous, Cole. More than generous. It's practical." But his voice carried warmth beneath the gruff dismissal. "Can't run a ranch forever on men who can't read or calculate. Investment in the children is investment in the ranch's future." He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at her. "You settling in all right? Boys doing okay?" "We're doing well," Evelyn said, and meant it. "Better than I expected." "Good." He nodded once, satisfied, and disappeared into the darkness. After he left, Evelyn sat with the book spread around her, Caleb watching with sleepy curiosity. "Mama?" he asked. "Are we going to stay here?" Evelyn looked at her son, this serious boy who'd had to grow up too fast, who'd held his brothers together through grief and uncertainty. "I think so, sweetheart. If we work hard and do right by these people, I think this could be home." Caleb nodded slowly, then returned his attention to his letters. But Evelyn saw the tension leave his thin shoulders, saw relief settle into his young bones. And she understood that what Cole Granger had given them wasn't just shelter or wages or opportunity. He'd given them the chance to stop running, to stop being afraid, to build something that couldn't be taken away by accident or illness or the cruelty of reluctant family. He'd given them a future, and Evelyn was determined to prove worthy of it. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. Evelyn woke before dawn, nervous energy making sleep impossible. She'd spent the weekend transforming one of the ranch's unused storage sheds into a classroom. cleaning, arranging benches, setting up a makeshift blackboard made from painted wood. Mrs. Whitlow had helped, and even Cole had appeared Saturday afternoon to install a small stove for heat. By 8 o'clock, 9 children sat on the benches, ranging in age from 5 to 12, their faces showing varying degrees of interest and apprehension. Evelyn stood before them, feeling the weight of responsibility and possibility in equal measure. "Good morning," she began. "My name is Mrs. Mercer, and I'm going to be your teacher. Some of you are already good readers. Some of you are just learning your letters. That's all right. We're going to work together, help each other, and by the end of this year, every one of you is going to know how to read, write, and calculate well enough to handle whatever life asks of you." She saw doubt on some faces, hope on others. The oldest Henderson boy, Thomas, named coincidentally for her late husband, raised his hand. "Yes, Thomas?" "My pa says you came from Montana. Says you got 3 boys and no husband. Says Mr. Granger took you in when nobody else would." The other children watched with interest, waiting to see how she'd respond to this challenge. Evelyn met Thomas Henderson's eyes directly. "That's all true," she said calmly. "My husband died in a mining accident. I came here hoping family would help us, and they wouldn't. Mr. Granger offered us shelter and honest work. Everything I have here, I'm earning, just like your parents earn what they have. Any other questions?" Thomas shook his head, apparently satisfied with the direct answer. "Good. Now, let's see what you all know. Thomas, you're the oldest. Come up here and read from this primer." The morning passed quickly, consumed by assessment and organization. By lunch, Evelyn had a clear picture of each child's abilities and a plan for grouping them effectively. After the children left, she sat alone in the quiet classroom, feeling the particular exhaustion and satisfaction that came from hard work done well. "How'd it go?" Cole appeared in the doorway, his presence filling the small space. "Well, I think they're good children, eager to learn." "Thomas Henderson give you trouble? He can be direct." Evelyn smiled. "He asked direct questions. I gave direct answers. We understood each other." Cole nodded, something like approval crossing his features. "That's the way to handle it. These kids respect honesty. Try to soft soap them and they'll eat you alive." He paused. "You need anything? Supplies? Different arrangements? Anything?" "No, you and Mrs. Whitlow have provided everything I need, more than I need." "All right then. I'll let you get back to it." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Evelyn, you did good today. The parents are already talking about how organized you are, how you treated their children with respect. That matters out here." The use of her first name registered, as did the genuine warmth in his voice. "Thank you, Cole." After he left, Evelyn sat for a long moment in the empty classroom, processing the day, the week, the astonishing shift her life had taken. 1 week ago, she'd been standing outside Samuel's door, holding $20 and 3 frightened children, with nowhere to go and no plan beyond desperate hope. Now she had a home, wages, work that mattered, and, most surprisingly, the respect of people who had no reason to give it beyond what she earned. And she had Cole Granger, this quiet, steady man who'd offered help without expectation, who'd treated her not as a victim to be pitied, but as a capable woman who'd hit a rough patch and needed a fair chance. She thought about Thomas, about the life they'd planned that would never happen. And for the first time since his death, she felt something other than grief when she thought of him. She felt gratitude for the love they'd shared, for the sons he'd given her, and even for the letter that had brought her here despite being wrong about the brother. Because maybe that letter had been right in a way Thomas never intended. Maybe this was exactly where she needed to be. Maybe second chances looked like this. Not dramatic rescue, but quiet opportunity. Not salvation, but simple fairness from someone who understood that most people just needed a chance to prove what they could do. Outside, the Colorado winter sun slanted across the ranch, turning the snow to gold. Evelyn gathered her teaching materials, locked the classroom door, and walked back toward her cabin where her sons would be waiting for lunch, their voices carrying on the cold air. She was home. And for now, that was enough. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt almost like peace. Evelyn rose before dawn each day, made breakfast for her boys, then walked to the main house to help Mrs. Whitlow prepare the morning meal for the ranch hands. Teaching days she spent in the classroom, working with the children who proved both challenging and rewarding in equal measure. Non-teaching days she devoted to household work, mending, cooking, preserving, all the endless tasks that kept a working ranch functioning. Caleb had indeed taken to ranch work with an eagerness that made Evelyn's heart ache. Old Joe had claimed him as a sort of apprentice, teaching him to handle chickens, muck stalls, carry water, all the small but necessary tasks that kept the operation running. The $5 Cole paid him each month went into a tin can Caleb kept under his bed, counted and recounted with the seriousness of a banker managing millions. Saving for something? Evelyn had asked one evening, watching him add his latest earnings to the growing pile. In case, Caleb had answered simply, and Evelyn understood. In case this ended. In case they had to run again. In case safety proved temporary, as it always had before. She didn't tell him to stop saving, she just worked harder to prove they wouldn't need to run. By mid-March, the children had made remarkable progress. Even the youngest Cartwright could now recognize letters and sound out simple words. Thomas Henderson was reading at a level that would challenge students twice his age, and all of them had learned something perhaps more valuable than academics. They'd learned to help each other, the older ones tutoring the younger, the quick ones patient with the slow. "You've built something good here," Mrs. Whitlow said one afternoon as they worked together in the kitchen, preparing bread for the week. "Those children don't just learn from you, they trust you. That's harder to earn." Evelyn shaped dough with practiced hands, thinking about trust, about earning it, about what it cost when broken. "I just treat them like I'd want someone to treat my boys, with respect and honesty." "That's rarer than you think." Mrs. Whitlow slid 3 loaves into the oven, adjusted the temperature with expert precision. "Most teachers out here, they come from back east with their fancy ideas about civilization and improvement. They look at these ranch children like they're something to be fixed rather than taught. You don't do that. These children aren't broken. They're just learning in a different context than city children would." "Exactly." Mrs. Whitlow wiped flour from her hands, her sharp eyes approving. "Cole said you'd understand that. Said you had the sense to see what was in front of you, rather than what you expected to see." The mention of Cole made Evelyn pause. Over the weeks, she'd become aware of his presence in ways that both concerned and comforted her. He was everywhere on the ranch, checking fence lines, working with the hands, managing the endless details that kept a cattle operation profitable. But he also appeared at odd moments, in the classroom doorway to deliver more supplies, at the cabin with firewood he'd split himself, in the main house kitchen to quietly eat meals while the hands talked around him. He watched her, she'd noticed, not in any threatening way, but with the same careful attention he gave everything on his ranch, making sure she was managing, making sure the boys were settling, making sure the arrangement was working. "Cole's been good to us," Evelyn said carefully, "more than fair." "Cole's a good man." Mrs. Whitlow's voice carried absolute certainty. "But he's also a lonely one, though he'd never admit it. This ranch is his life, has been for 15 years. But a ranch isn't company, and work isn't comfort. Just something you might keep in mind." Before Evelyn could respond, the kitchen door opened and Cole himself appeared, stamping snow from his boots. The late winter storm that had been threatening all day had finally arrived, turning the afternoon white and bitter. "Getting bad out there," he said without preamble. "Mrs. Whitlow, you should stay in the guest room tonight rather than try for your cabin. Evelyn, you and the boys are fine where you are, but don't try to come to the main house until it clears. I'll have someone bring supplies to you." "The children," Evelyn said immediately. "They can't walk home in this." "Already sent word to the families. Kids are staying in the bunkhouse tonight. Old Joe's telling them stories and feeding them supper. They'll be fine." Evelyn felt relief wash through her. "Thank you." Cole shrugged, brushing snow from his hat. "Just practical. Can't have children freezing between here and their homes." But his eyes met hers with warmth that had nothing to do with practicality, and Evelyn felt something shift in her chest, a recognition she wasn't quite ready to examine. The storm lasted 2 days, burying the ranch under 18 inches of heavy, wet snow. Evelyn and her boys stayed in their cabin, warm and safe, while outside the world turned white and wild. On the second afternoon, when the snow finally stopped and weak sunlight broke through the clouds, a knock came at the door. Cole stood on the porch, snow clinging to his coat and hat, his breath fogging in the cold air. "Wanted to check on you, make sure you had everything you needed." "We're fine. The stove kept us warm and we had plenty of food." Evelyn stepped back. "Come in. You look frozen." He hesitated, and she understood why. In 2 months, he'd never entered her cabin beyond the doorway. Always maintained that careful distance, that clear boundary between employer and employee, between man and woman whose circumstances had thrown them together. "Just for coffee," she said quietly. "To warm up before you head back." He came in, moving carefully in the small space. The boys were in the bedroom, playing some elaborate game involving Caleb's precious saved coins. Evelyn poured coffee from the pot she kept constantly warm, handed Cole a cup. "Thank you for checking on us," she said. "You didn't have to walk all this way. Wanted to make sure you were managing." He wrapped his hands around the cup, and Evelyn noticed they were raw with cold, the knuckles split from hard work in winter conditions. Storm like that, things can go wrong fast. Stoves malfunction, roofs leak, supplies run short. "We're managing, more than managing." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Cole, I've been meaning to ask, are you satisfied with my work? With the teaching? With the household help? Because if there's anything you need done differently, you're doing fine." The answer came immediately, certain. "Better than fine. The children are learning, the parents are happy, and Mrs. Whitlow says you work harder than any 2 women she's known. Why are you asking?" Evelyn traced the rim of her coffee cup, trying to articulate the fear that had been building despite all evidence to the contrary. "Because this has been good. Too good, maybe. And I keep waiting for the moment when it falls apart, when you decide we're more trouble than we're worth, when—" "Stop." Cole's voice was gentle but firm. "Listen to me, Evelyn. You're not trouble. You've earned every penny I've paid you, and more. Your boys are good boys who work hard and don't cause problems. And you've brought something to this ranch that it needed. Education for the children, yes, but also stability, order, purpose beyond just running cattle and making money." He set down his cup, met her eyes directly. "I don't know what kind of promises men made you before, what kind of security you lost when your husband died. But I'm telling you plain, as long as you want to be here, as long as you do the work, which you're already doing, you have a place on this ranch. That's not charity. That's business. And it's also the truth." Evelyn felt her throat tighten with emotion she couldn't quite name. "Thank you for saying that, for meaning it." "I always mean what I say." Cole stood, reaching for his hat. "Storm's cleared enough, I should check the rest of the families. You need anything, you send Caleb to the main house." After he left, Evelyn sat alone with her cooling coffee, processing the conversation, the promise he'd made, the way his presence seemed to fill spaces even after he'd gone. Mrs. Whitlow's words echoed in her mind. Cole's a good man, but he's also a lonely one. She thought about Thomas, about the love they'd shared that had been real but never easy, never peaceful. Thomas had been restless, always chasing the next opportunity, the next promise of prosperity that never quite materialized. She'd loved him, but she'd never felt safe with him, not truly. Safety required more than love. It required steadiness, reliability, the kind of solid presence that didn't shift with circumstances. The kind of presence Cole Granger embodied in every action, every word, every quiet promise kept. It was dangerous, she realized, to compare a dead husband to a living employer. Dangerous and unfair to both men. But the comparison came anyway, unbidden and insistent. April arrived with mud and renewal, the snow melting into rivers that turned the ranch roads to thick soup. Evelyn continued teaching, continued working, continued building the life she'd stumbled into with equal parts desperation and luck. The children thrived. Her boys grew stronger, healthier, their faces losing the gaunt look that hunger had carved into their bones. And Cole remained present in his careful, steady way, checking on her progress, providing what she needed, maintaining that respectful distance that felt increasingly like a wall she didn't want between them. It was Mrs. Whitlow who finally named what Evelyn had been trying not to acknowledge. "You have feelings for him," the older woman said one morning as they worked together in the garden behind the main house, planting vegetables for the summer. It wasn't a question. Evelyn's hands stilled in the dirt. That would be inappropriate. Probably, but feelings don't much care about appropriate. Mrs. Whitlow continued planting with steady efficiency. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Nothing. He's my employer. I'm his employee. I have children to think about and a position to maintain. Acting on feelings would jeopardize everything we've built here. Would it? Mrs. Whitlow sat back on her heels, studying Evelyn with those sharp, knowing eyes. Or are you afraid it might work out, and you'd have to trust something good again? The words hit harder than Evelyn expected. I trust Cole. You trust him to be fair, to keep his promises, to provide work and wages. But do you trust him with more than that? With hope? With the possibility that maybe this isn't just survival, but the beginning of something that could matter? Evelyn pressed her hands into the soil, feeling its cool dampness, its promise of growth. I don't know if I have that kind of trust left. Thomas died and Samuel turned us away, and I spent 6 months learning that security is an illusion. Even this, she gestured at the ranch around them. Even this could end tomorrow if Cole changed his mind or the ranch failed or... Life could end tomorrow, Mrs. Whitlow interrupted. That's always true, but you're already living it anyway. Question is whether you're going to live it afraid or live it open to whatever comes next. Before Evelyn could answer, a shout came from the direction of the main house. Both women stood quickly, brushing dirt from their skirts. Old Joe was running, actually running, something the aging cowboy never did, toward the house, his face urgent. Mrs. Whitlow, get Cole. Marcus is down in the south pasture. Horse rolled on him. The afternoon dissolved into controlled crisis. Marcus, one of the brothers from Kansas, had been thrown when his horse spooked and then crushed when the animal fell trying to regain its feet. By the time they brought him to the main house on a makeshift stretcher, he was unconscious, his leg bent at an angle that made Evelyn's stomach turn. Cole took charge with quiet authority, sending riders for the doctor in town, organizing the hands to care for the injured man, directing Mrs. Whitlow to prepare a room. Evelyn found herself assigned to sit with Marcus's brother, James, who stood white-faced and shaking in the hallway. He's going to die, James said, his voice hollow. Just like our pa died when the wagon tipped. Just like... He's not going to die. Evelyn took the young man's hands, forced him to meet her eyes. The doctor's coming. Cole knows what he's doing. Your brother is strong and young and has every reason to fight. But right now, he needs you to be strong, too. Can you do that? James nodded slowly, some of the panic leaving his features. Yes, ma'am. The doctor arrived as sunset painted the sky orange and purple. He was an older man, weathered and competent, who examined Marcus with gentle efficiency while Cole and James hovered nearby. Legs broken bad, the doctor pronounced finally. Ribs are bruised, maybe cracked. He's got a hard recovery ahead, but he should live if infection doesn't set in. He'll need constant care for at least a week, maybe 2. He'll have it, Cole said immediately. Whatever he needs. The doctor nodded. I'll leave instructions with Mrs. Whitlow. Someone should sit with him through the night, watch for fever, and he can't be moved for at least 10 days. After the doctor left, Cole gathered the household in the kitchen. Marcus lay unconscious in the guest room, his brother sitting vigil beside him. Mrs. Whitlow looked exhausted. The ranch hands were subdued, reminded too clearly of their own mortality. We'll manage, Cole said quietly. James will stay with his brother. Old Joe, you'll take on Marcus's work until he's back on his feet. Everyone else continues as normal. Accidents happen on ranches. We deal with them and move forward. Later that night, Evelyn volunteered to take the first watch sitting with Marcus. The house had settled into uneasy quiet, everyone gone to their own spaces except Cole, who remained in his office handling paperwork by lamplight. Around midnight, Marcus stirred, moaning with pain as consciousness returned. Evelyn was at his side immediately, offering water, adjusting pillows, speaking in low, soothing tones. Easy now. You're safe. You had an accident, but the doctor's been here. You're going to be fine. Marcus's eyes focused on her with difficulty. James? Sleeping in the next room. He's fine. Everyone's fine. Can't work, Marcus mumbled, distress clear even through the laudanum the doctor had administered. Can't earn my keep if I can't work. Don't worry about that now. Just focus on healing. But Marcus's agitation increased. Boss'll fire me. Can't keep a hand who can't work. We'll lose our place here, James and me. No one's firing anyone. Cole's voice came from the doorway, quiet and certain. He moved into the room, pulled up a chair beside the bed. You're going to heal, Marcus. Then you're going to go back to work. Until then, your wages continue same as always. Understood? But I can't. You can heal. That's your job right now. Everything else we'll handle. Cole's voice carried absolute conviction. You're part of this ranch, Marcus. That doesn't change because you got hurt doing ranch work. It just means we take care of you until you're back on your feet. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Whether from pain or relief or laudanum, Evelyn couldn't tell. But the tension left his body, and he settled back into the pillows. Thank you, boss, he whispered. Cole sat with him until he slept again, then stood, nodding to Evelyn. I'll take the next watch. You should rest. But Evelyn followed him out into the hallway, her mind full of the exchange she'd just witnessed. That was kind. What you said to him. It was fair. Cole rubbed his face, exhaustion showing in the gesture. Man gets hurt working for me. Least I can do is make sure he doesn't lose everything because of it. Most employers wouldn't see it that way. Then most employers are fools. Cole met her eyes. These men work hard, Evelyn. They're loyal and skilled, and they make this ranch profitable. Why would I throw that away over an accident? Why would I make them afraid to work hard because one mistake could cost them their livelihood? It was the most she'd heard him say at once about his philosophy, his approach to running the ranch. And Evelyn understood in that moment something she'd been circling around for weeks. Cole Granger's fairness wasn't just a personality trait. It was a deliberate choice, a way of building something that lasted because it was founded on mutual respect rather than fear. You're a good man, she said quietly. I'm a practical one. But his eyes held hers, and in the lamplight of the hallway, with the house quiet around them and Marcus sleeping peacefully in the next room, something passed between them. Recognition, possibility, the acknowledgement of feelings neither was quite ready to name. Evelyn, Cole said, his voice rough. I should tell you. A crash came from upstairs, followed by Toby's frightened cry. Evelyn bolted toward the sound, Cole right behind her. They found her youngest son standing in the hallway outside the guest room where Mrs. Whitlow slept, tears streaming down his face, a broken water pitcher at his feet. I had a nightmare, Toby sobbed. I couldn't find you, Mama, and I was scared, and I knocked over the pitcher, and... Evelyn gathered him into her arms, her heart rate slowly settling. It's all right, sweetheart. It's all right. I'm here. Cole had already gone to fetch a broom and dustpan. He cleaned up the broken pottery with efficient movements while Evelyn soothed her son. Mrs. Whitlow appeared, sleep-rumpled and concerned, took in the situation with one glance. Boy needs his mother, she said. Cole, you take the watch on Marcus. Evelyn, get this child back to your cabin and settled. We'll manage here. The walk back to the cabin through the dark April night was quiet. Toby heavy in Evelyn's arms, Caleb and Nate trailing behind, woken by the commotion. Cole had insisted on walking them, carrying a lantern to light the way. At the cabin door he paused. What I was trying to say earlier can wait, Evelyn finished gently, until things are less chaotic, until we both know what we mean to say. Cole nodded slowly. Until then. After he left, Evelyn tucked her sons into bed, all three of them crowded into the small bedroom because Toby refused to be alone. She sat with them until their breathing deepened into sleep, then moved to the window, looking out toward the main house where lamplight still glowed in Marcus's room. Mrs. Whitlow's words echoed again. Are you afraid it might work out and you'd have to trust something good again? Maybe she was afraid. Maybe trust was harder than survival because survival only required endurance, but trust required hope. And hope meant vulnerability, meant opening herself to the possibility of loss all over again. But sitting in her cabin with her sleeping sons nearby, thinking about Cole's steady presence and quiet promises, about the life they'd built here that felt more real with each passing day, Evelyn realized something important. She was already hoping, already trusting, whether she admitted it or not. Already building something that mattered with a man who seemed to understand that the best foundations were built on fairness and respect rather than romance and rescue. The question wasn't whether to trust. The question was whether to acknowledge what she was already feeling and see where that acknowledgement led. Outside, the April moon rose over the lazy G, painting everything in silver light. Somewhere in the main house, Cole sat watch over an injured hand, keeping promises to men who depended on him. And here in the cabin, Evelyn kept watch over sons who depended on her, both of them doing the work of building something that could last. Maybe that was enough for now. Maybe the rest would come when it was ready, in its own time, without forcing or fear. Maybe second chances didn't announce themselves with drama, but built slowly, day by day, choice by choice. Until one morning you woke up and realized you were already living the life you'd stopped believing possible. Evelyn closed the curtains, banked the stove, and went to bed thinking about tomorrow, about teaching and working and the thousand small tasks that made a life. But also thinking about Cole, about conversations unfinished and possibilities unnamed, about what might grow if given patience and time. Marcus's recovery became the rhythm that carried them through late April and into May. The young cowboy healed slowly but steadily, his leg mending under the doctor's careful monitoring and the ranch's collective care. James rarely left his brother's side those first weeks, and Evelyn found herself spending more time in the main house, helping Mrs. Whitlow manage the extra work of an invalid, plus the regular demands of feeding ranch hands and maintaining order. It meant more time near Cole, more moments of intersection in hallways and kitchens, more quiet conversations in the margins of busy days. They spoke of practical things, Marcus's progress, the children's education, the spring planting that needed attention. But underneath the practical ran something else, a current of awareness that made even mundane exchanges feel weighted with significance. "You're wearing yourself thin," Cole said one evening in early May, finding Evelyn in the kitchen long after everyone else had gone to bed. She was preparing bread dough for the next day, her movements automatic with exhaustion. "I'm managing." "That's what you always say." He moved closer, not touching but near enough that she could feel his presence like warmth from a fire. But managing isn't the same as being all right. Evelyn kneaded the dough with unnecessary force, trying to work out tension that had nothing to do with bread and everything to do with the man standing too close in the quiet kitchen. "What do you want me to say, Cole? That I'm tired? I'm always tired. That I worry about whether I'm doing enough, being enough? I always worry. But I'm also grateful for this life, for this opportunity, for what?" His voice was quiet, careful. She stopped kneading, her hands still in the dough. "For you, for what you've given us. For being the kind of man who sees people as they are instead of what's convenient for you to see." The silence that followed felt alive, full of things neither of them quite knew how to say. Finally, Cole spoke, his words measured and deliberate. "I need to tell you something, Evelyn. Something I should have told you before, but the timing never seemed right, and then it felt like maybe it was too late, and—" He stopped, frustrated with his own fumbling. "I'm not good at this. At talking about things that matter." Evelyn turned to face him fully, seeing in his expression something she recognized from her own mirror, the fear of vulnerability, the weight of past loss, the terrible risk of hoping. "Whatever it is, you can tell me." Cole took a breath, his hands flexing at his sides like he needed something to hold on to. "I was married once, long time ago, before I came to Colorado. Her name was Lillian. We'd been married 3 years when she got pregnant. I was away on a cattle drive, gone 6 weeks, and when I came back, she was dead. Influenza. She'd been sick 2 days, gone on the 3rd, the baby with her." Evelyn felt her heart constrict. "Cole, I'm so sorry." "It was 15 years ago." He said it like the time should have made it hurt less, but his voice suggested otherwise. "I sold everything back in Kansas, came out here, started over. Built this ranch from nothing because I needed something to build, something that couldn't die on me when I wasn't looking. And I told myself I was done with hoping for more than work and land and cattle." He paused, meeting her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Then you showed up with 3 boys and $20 and more courage than sense. And you looked at this opportunity like it was worth fighting for instead of a handout to be ashamed of. And you worked harder than anyone I've ever employed. And your boys—" His voice roughened. "Your boys reminded me that children can laugh instead of just being mouths to feed, that families can be loud and messy and still be good." "Cole, Let me finish. He took a step closer. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand something. What I feel for you isn't about loneliness or convenience. It's not about needing a housekeeper or wanting someone to warm my bed. It's about watching you teach those children with patience I didn't know existed. It's about seeing you fierce and protective with your boys 1 minute and gentle with Marcus when he was scared the next. It's about the way you look at this ranch like it's worth tending instead of just surviving. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she wiped them on her apron, trying to process words she'd wanted to hear and feared in equal measure. What are you saying? I'm saying I have feelings for you, strong ones, and I don't know what to do with them because you're my employee and you've got children to think about. And I swore 15 years ago I wouldn't open myself up to this kind of hurt again. But I'm also saying I'm tired of pretending I don't notice when you walk into a room. I'm tired of keeping careful distance when what I want is to be close. I'm tired of... The kitchen door banged open and Mrs. Whitlow appeared, breathless and urgent. Marcus is fevering bad. Doctor said to watch for this. Infection in the leg wound. We need to get him cooled down fast or we're going to lose him. The moment shattered. Cole was moving before Evelyn could process, grabbing supplies, shouting for James, organizing the crisis with the same focused efficiency he brought to everything. Evelyn followed, her mind reeling from interrupted conversation, but her hands steady as she helped prepare cool compresses, fetch water, follow the doctor's written instructions that Mrs. Whitlow read aloud with shaking voice. For 3 days, Marcus burned with fever that made him delirious and thrashing. They took turns sitting with him, Cole and James and Evelyn and Mrs. Whitlow, round-the-clock watches that blurred together in exhaustion and fear. The doctor came twice, did what he could, warned them honestly that it could go either way. On the third night, Evelyn took the midnight watch, while Cole slept fitfully in a chair in the hallway and James dozed in the corner. Marcus had been quiet for hours, his breathing shallow but steady, his skin cool enough to give hope. She was changing the compress on his forehead when his eyes opened, lucid for the first time in days. Mrs. Mercer? His voice was barely a whisper. I'm here, Marcus. You're doing better. The fever broke. Thought I was dying. He swallowed with difficulty. Kept seeing my ma, hearing her call me home. Evelyn took his hand gently. Your ma will have to wait. You're not going anywhere yet. Boss stayed. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. He did. Barely left your side except when we forced him to rest. Marcus's eyes filled with tears that slid down his temples into his hair. Never had a boss who cared if I lived or died. Never had anyone except James who gave a damn. Well, you do now. Evelyn squeezed his hand. You've got a whole ranch full of people who care. So you focus on healing, and we'll focus on everything else. Cole appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of voices. When he saw Marcus awake and coherent, relief flooded his features so completely that Evelyn saw past the careful control he always maintained, saw straight through to the man underneath who felt everything deeply and showed almost nothing. Welcome back, Cole said quietly, moving to the other side of the bed. You gave us a scare. Sorry, boss. Don't apologize. Just get well. Cole's voice was rough. And Marcus, when you're back on your feet, I want to talk to you and James about partnership possibilities. Been thinking about expanding the cattle operation. Need men I can trust to manage it. Think you two might be interested? Marcus stared at him, shock and hope warring on his fever-weakened face. Partnership? But we're just hands. We don't have capital. We'll work out the details when you're stronger. For now, just know that you've got a future here if you want it. Both of you. After Marcus drifted back to sleep, real sleep this time, not the fevered unconsciousness of illness, Cole and Evelyn stood together in the hallway while the house settled into pre-dawn quiet. You didn't have to offer them partnership, Evelyn said softly. Kindness would have been enough. Wasn't kindness, was business. But Cole's slight smile suggested otherwise. They're good men, smart, hardworking, loyal. Why wouldn't I want them invested in the ranch's success? Because most men in your position wouldn't see it that way. Most men would keep all the power and profit for themselves. Cole turned to face her, his expression serious in the dim lamplight. I learned something when Lillian died, Evelyn. I learned that you can't hold on to things by grasping tight. You can only build something that lasts by giving people reason to invest themselves in it, by treating them fair and trusting them to do the same, by making them partners instead of keeping them dependent. The words resonated with everything Evelyn had observed about how he ran the ranch, how he treated his employees, how he'd approached her situation from the beginning. Not rescue, but opportunity. Not charity, but fair exchange. "Is that what you want with me?" she asked, the question emerging before she could reconsider its wisdom. "Partnership?" Cole was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "I want a lot of things with you, Evelyn Mercer. Partnership is just the beginning of it." Before she could respond, before either of them could name what was building between them with increasing intensity, James emerged from Marcus's room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "He's asking for water," the young man said, and the moment dissolved into practical care once again. But later, walking back to her cabin as dawn painted the eastern sky pink and gold, Evelyn carried Cole's words with her like a secret warmth against the morning chill. Partnership is just the beginning of it. The promise implicit in those words both thrilled and terrified her. The boys were still sleeping when she arrived, exhausted from their night's vigil. Mrs. Whitlow had stayed with them, sleeping on the small sofa in the main room. The older woman woke as Evelyn entered, took one look at her face, and smiled knowingly. "Fever broke?" "Yes. Marcus is going to be all right." "Good. And you and Cole? You going to be all right too?" Evelyn sank into a chair, too tired to maintain pretense. "I don't know, Alma. I don't know if I'm ready for what he's offering. Don't know if I can trust myself to want it and not ruin it by being too afraid or too careful or too human," Mrs. Whitlow finished gently. "Evelyn, you've been surviving so long you've forgotten how to live. Cole's the same way for different reasons. Maybe what you both need is someone who understands that fear, who won't push when you need space, but who also won't let you hide forever." "What if I fail him? What if I'm not what he needs? Or what if something happens to me and he has to go through that loss again? What if you succeed? What if you're exactly what he needs, and he's exactly what you need, and you build something together that's stronger than either of you alone?" Mrs. Whitlow stood, gathering her shawl. "Life doesn't come with guarantees, dear girl. You can spend it protecting yourself from hurt, or you can spend it reaching for good things and dealing with hurt if it comes. But you can't do both." After she left, Evelyn sat in the quiet cabin watching her son sleep, thinking about fear and courage, about survival and living, about the difference between protecting yourself and imprisoning yourself. She thought about Thomas, about the love they'd shared that had been real but restless, built on dreams that never quite materialized. And she thought about Cole, about the steady, solid reality he represented, about partnership instead of rescue, about building something that lasted through fairness and respect and honest work. The parallel terrified her because it forced her to admit something she'd been avoiding. She was falling in love with Cole Granger. Maybe had been falling since that first night when he'd offered shelter without expectation. Maybe had been falling every time he kept a promise, treated her boys with kindness, showed her that steadiness could be more powerful than passion. But falling in love meant vulnerability, meant opening herself to loss, meant trusting that this time, this man, this life could be different from everything she'd known before. The question was whether she had the courage to take that risk. May deepened into summer, and with Marcus on the mend, the ranch settled back into its regular rhythms. The children finished their school year with a small celebration that Evelyn organized, a picnic with games and prizes, proud parents watching their children demonstrate reading skills and mathematical knowledge they hadn't possessed 6 months earlier. Cole attended the celebration, standing at the edge of the gathering with the other men, watching Evelyn work the crowd with easy grace. She'd grown confident in her role, he realized. The nervous widow who'd arrived with 3 boys and $20 had transformed into a woman who belonged here, who contributed, who mattered. You going to tell her how you feel, or you going to keep staring like a lovesick calf? Old Joe materialized at Cole's elbow, his weathered face amused. "Don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't. That's why you watch her every chance you get. Why you find excuses to be wherever she's working. Why you smile more in the last 4 months than you have in the last 4 years combined." Cole shot him a warning look, but old Joe just grinned, unrepentant. "Man's allowed to have feelings," the cowboy continued. "Even a man as stubborn and closed off as you. Question is whether you're going to act on them or let her slip away because you're too scared to risk your heart again. She's my employee. I've got responsibilities, boundaries I shouldn't cross. She's a woman you care about who cares right back, if the way she looks at you means anything. And last I checked, there's no law against employers and employees having feelings for each other, especially when they're both adults with sense enough to navigate it proper." Cole didn't answer, but old Joe's words stayed with him through the rest of the celebration and into the evening. He'd been careful for so long, keeping distance, maintaining control, protecting himself from the possibility of hurt. But careful had started feeling like cowardly, and control had started feeling like prison. That night, he made a decision. The next day was Sunday, the one day of the week when work slowed and people had time for things beyond immediate necessity. Cole found Evelyn in the garden behind her cabin, working in the early morning cool while her boys played nearby. "Can we talk?" he asked without preamble. Evelyn looked up from the carrot she was thinning, something flickering in her eyes. Hope, fear, recognition. "Of course." "Not here. Somewhere private. There's a place I want to show you, if you'll come." She glanced at her boys, calculating, and Cole anticipated her concern. "Mrs. Whitlow will watch them. I already asked. We'll only be gone a few hours." Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron, made her decision. "All right, let me tell Caleb." 20 minutes later, they were riding together across the ranch, Cole on his bay gelding, Evelyn on a gentle mare he'd saddled for her. They rode in comfortable silence, heading northwest toward the mountains that formed the ranch's backdrop. After an hour, Cole guided them off the main trail, following a path that seemed to exist more in memory than reality. They climbed through pine forest, the air cooling and thinning, until they emerged onto a high meadow that took Evelyn's breath away. The meadow stretched wide and green, dotted with wildflowers in purple and yellow and white. A stream ran through its center, clear and cold from snowmelt. And beyond it all, the mountains rose like walls between earth and sky, their peaks still white with snow that wouldn't melt until August. "This is beautiful," Evelyn breathed, dismounting to stand in the grass. "This is mine." Cole swung down from his horse, stood beside her. "Bought it 15 years ago when I first came to Colorado. Paid too much for land nobody else wanted because it was too high, too remote, too hard to use for grazing. But I bought it anyway because when I stood here, I could breathe, could think, could believe that maybe starting over was possible." He turned to face her, his expression open in a way she'd never seen. "I've never brought anyone here before. This place has been mine alone all these years. But I wanted to share it with you, wanted you to understand something about me, about how I see things." Evelyn waited, sensing the importance of this moment, this place, this man finally letting her see past his careful walls. "When Lillian died, I thought my life was over," Cole said quietly. "Thought the best I could hope for was work and land and eventual old age, without anyone to mourn me. Built walls so high nothing could hurt me because nothing could reach me. And for 15 years, that worked. Until it didn't. Until you showed up and made me remember that walls keep out hurt, but they also keep out joy, keep out connection, keep out the possibility of building something that matters with someone who understands what it costs." He took her hands gently, his calloused palms warm against her work-roughened fingers. "I'm in love with you, Evelyn. Not because you're convenient or because I'm lonely or because you showed up when I needed help. I'm in love with you because you're brave and fierce and tender all at once, because you love your boys with everything you have, but you're also building something beyond them, because you look at what you've been given and you work to deserve it instead of taking it for granted." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Cole, I know you're scared. I know you lost your husband and your security, and you spent months not knowing if you'd survive. I know trusting again feels like stepping off a cliff with no certainty there's ground on the other side. But I'm asking you to trust me anyway, to take the risk with me, to build something together that's based on partnership and respect and honest feeling." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, pulled out a simple silver ring set with a small blue stone. "This was my mother's. Only thing I kept from Kansas besides painful memories. I want you to have it, Not as a demand or an expectation, but as a promise. A promise that I'll be steady when you need steady, that I'll give you space when you need space, that I'll love your boys like they're mine and build a life with you that's worth the risk of hoping again. Evelyn looked at the ring, at Cole's face, at the meadow spreading around them like a benediction. Every fear she'd carried for months rose up. What if he left? What if she failed? What if loss came again and destroyed everything they built? But stronger than the fear was something else, something that had been growing since that first night in the cabin when he'd offered shelter and kept his promises. Trust. Not blind trust, not foolish trust, but the hard-won trust that came from watching someone prove themselves day after day, choice after choice, promise after promise. "I'm afraid," she said honestly. "Afraid of losing you. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid of letting myself want this and having it taken away." "I'm afraid too," Cole admitted. "Terrified, actually. But I'm more afraid of living the rest of my life safe and alone, watching you from distance, never knowing what we could have built together if we'd had the courage to try." Evelyn thought about her boys, about the life she was building, about the woman she'd become in these months on the Lazy G. She thought about partnership instead of rescue, about earning instead of accepting, about building something that lasted because it was founded on mutual respect and honest work. And she thought about love, not the restless, desperate love she'd known with Thomas, but something steadier and deeper, built on daily choices, and kept promises and the courage to be vulnerable with someone who understood both strength and fear. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the tears now streaming down her face. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll take the risk. Yes, I'll build this life with you and trust that what we're creating together is worth every fear I'm carrying." Cole's smile transformed his face, made him look younger and lighter than she'd ever seen him. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if meant to be there. And then he pulled her close, his arms strong and sure around her. "I'll take care of you," he murmured against her hair. "You and your boys. I'll be the steady ground you stand on, the partner you deserve, the father those children need." Evelyn pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "And I'll take care of you. I'll be the home you come back to, the partner you can trust, the woman who sees you for exactly who you are and loves you anyway." They stood together in the high meadow while the wind moved through the grass and the stream sang its endless song and the mountains watched like ancient witnesses. And for the first time since Thomas died, since Samuel turned them away, since that desperate night outside the general store, Evelyn felt something more powerful than fear. She felt hope. She felt certainty. She felt like she'd finally found the place where she belonged, not through rescue or charity, but through her own courage and the grace of a man who understood that the strongest foundations were built on fairness and respect and the willingness to risk your heart one more time. The ride back to the ranch was quiet but different, charged with new understanding and acknowledged feeling. When they arrived, the boys rushed out to greet them, Caleb's sharp eyes immediately catching the ring on his mother's finger. "Mama?" he asked carefully. "Is that new?" Evelyn knelt to his level, gathering all three sons close. "Mr. Granger has asked me to marry him, and I've said yes. That means he's going to be part of our family, and we're going to be part of his. How do you feel about that?" The boys looked at each other, some silent communication passing between them. Then Caleb, serious as always, turned to Cole. "You going to take care of her? And us?" "I am," Cole said simply. "For as long as I live, you have my word on that. And we can stay here? This is really home now?" "This is really home now." Caleb nodded slowly, satisfaction settling over his young features. "Then I think it's good. I think Pa would think it's good too, that we found someone steady." The words hit Evelyn like a fist to the chest, making her realize her eldest son had understood far more about his father's restless nature than she'd ever acknowledged. And he was right. Thomas would want them steady, safe, settled with someone who could provide what he'd always struggled to provide. Nate and Toby, understanding less but reading their brother's approval, erupted into excited questions and demands to know if this meant they could call Cole Pa, and whether there would be a party and could they have cake. Mrs. Whitlow appeared on the porch of the main house, took one look at their faces, and smiled with deep satisfaction. "Finally," she called. "Took you too long enough?" That evening, Cole gathered the ranch hands and families to share the news. There was genuine happiness in the congratulations, real warmth in the celebration that followed. These people had watched Cole alone for 15 years, had seen him build an empire of land and cattle, but nothing resembling a life. And they'd watched Evelyn arrive with nothing and build everything through sheer determination and honest work. The match made sense to them in ways that romance or rescue never would have. This was partnership between equals, built on mutual respect and earned trust. This was two people who understood hard work and fair dealing, choosing to face the future together. As the celebration continued, Cole pulled Evelyn aside to the quiet porch of the main house. "When do you want to marry?" he asked. "We can wait as long as you need, or—" "I don't want to wait," Evelyn interrupted. "We've both waited long enough, I think. Both been careful long enough. Let's build this life starting now." Cole's hand found hers in the darkness, their fingers intertwining with the easy comfort of people who'd already been partners before they acknowledged being in love. "All right then. When? End of summer? Give us time to prepare properly. Tell everyone. Make it real." "End of summer," Cole agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted of hope and trust and the courage to believe that second chances could be even better than first ones, if you were brave enough to reach for them. The weeks following their engagement passed in a blur of preparation and growing anticipation. Summer deepened across the lazy G, turning the grass golden and filling the air with the scent of sage and sun-baked earth. Evelyn continued teaching through June and July, though the formal school year had ended. Several parents asked if she'd continue lessons through summer, not wanting their children to lose momentum, and she'd agreed to twice-weekly sessions. The wedding was set for the last Saturday in August, and Mrs. Whitlow had taken charge of preparations with the efficiency of a military general. Evelyn found herself swept along in decisions about food and flowers and whether to hold the ceremony inside the main house or outside under the cottonwoods. "Outside," Cole had said firmly when consulted. "This ranch is built on open land and honest sky. Our wedding should reflect that." So outside it would be, with the whole community invited and a celebration that would last well into the evening. Marcus and James, fully recovered and now officially partners in the expanded cattle operation, had volunteered to handle the meat, a whole steer roasted over an open pit. The ranch women were organizing dishes to share, and someone had arranged for a fiddle player from town. Through it all, Evelyn felt a strange mixture of joy and disbelief, as if she were living someone else's life, and at any moment would wake up back in that desperate night outside the general store. But then Cole would appear with some small, thoughtful gesture, wildflowers left on her cabin doorstep, a new slate and chalk for her teaching, his quiet presence at supper. And she'd remember this was real, this was happening, this was her life now. The boys had adapted to the coming change with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Nate and Toby were simply excited about the party and the cake. But Caleb, as always, processed things more deeply. One evening in mid-July, he found Evelyn alone in the garden and sat beside her with the serious expression that meant difficult questions were coming. "Mama, when you marry Mr. Granger, are you going to forget Pa?" Evelyn's hand stilled in the soil. She'd been expecting this question but hadn't prepared an answer that would satisfy an 8-year-old's need for truth and reassurance both. "No, sweetheart. I could never forget your father. He gave me you and your brothers, and that's the best gift anyone ever gave me. He loved us the best way he knew how." "But you love Mr. Granger now." "I do. But that doesn't erase what I felt for your father. Love isn't like money, Caleb. You don't run out of it by giving it to more people. Your heart just gets bigger to hold it all." Caleb thought about this, his young brow furrowed. Pa was always looking for something better, always saying the next camp would be different, the next claim would pay off. We moved a lot. We did. Mr. Granger doesn't seem like that. He seems like he stays put, builds things that last. The observation was so accurate, so precisely what Evelyn herself had recognized about Cole, that she felt tears prick her eyes. That's exactly what he does. And that's what we're going to do with him. Stay put, build something that lasts, have a real home. Good. Caleb's relief was palpable. I like it here. I like having friends who'll still be here next year. I like knowing where I'll sleep tomorrow night. Evelyn pulled her eldest son close, understanding that he'd carried fears and responsibilities no 8-year-old should have to carry. You're safe now, Caleb. We all are. And that's not going to change. But even as she offered reassurance, a small voice in Evelyn's mind whispered warnings. Nothing was certain. Life could shift without warning. Safety was always provisional, always dependent on circumstances beyond control. She'd learned that lesson too thoroughly to completely unlearn it now. The voice got louder in late July when Cole came down with what seemed like a simple summer cold. He kept working despite Mrs. Whitlow's protests, insisting it was nothing, just a cough that would pass. But the cough didn't pass. It deepened, became wet and rattling, turned his face pale and his eyes fever-bright. You need to rest, Evelyn insisted when she found him in the barn one afternoon, leaning against a post between coughing fits. This isn't a cold anymore, Cole. This is something worse. Can't rest. Too much work to do before winter. Fences to mend, hay to get in, cattle to move. The work will get done. You have good men who know what needs doing, but right now you need to be in bed before this turns into something that kills you. The word kills hung between them, sharp with the particular fear of people who'd both lost spouses to illness. Cole met her eyes and saw his own worry reflected back. All right, he said quietly. I'll rest, but just for a day or two. That night, his fever spiked. By morning, he was coughing so violently that Mrs. Whitlow sent for the doctor without asking permission. And by afternoon, when the doctor finally arrived after a delay caused by other patients, Cole was delirious, thrashing in bed, his breathing labored and desperate. Influenza, the doctor pronounced grimly. Bad strain too. Been seeing it all over the county. He's strong, which helps, but this is going to be touch and go for the next few days. Evelyn felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Influenza. The same disease that had taken Lillian 15 years ago. The same disease that had killed countless people in mining camps and frontier towns, striking without pattern or mercy. What do we do? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Keep him cool, force liquids when he's conscious, watch for pneumonia. If his breathing gets worse, or if he starts coughing blood, send for me immediately. Otherwise, all we can do is wait and hope his body fights it off. After the doctor left, Evelyn stood in the hallway outside Cole's room, processing fear that threatened to paralyze her. She'd just found this man, just agreed to build a life with him, just started to believe in the possibility of lasting happiness. And now he might be taken, might die while she watched helplessly, might leave her alone again with 3 boys and a future that suddenly seemed impossible. No, she said aloud, the word fierce in the quiet house. No, that's not happening, not this time. She organized a schedule with Mrs. Whitlow and Marcus and James, round-the-clock watches to monitor Cole's condition. She moved a cot into his room so she could be near him through the worst of it. And she fought the fever with cool cloths and forced liquids, fought the cough with steam and positioning, fought the despair that whispered he was already lost. On the second night, Cole's fever broke briefly, and he surfaced into something approaching consciousness. His eyes found Evelyn in the lamplight, recognition flickering. Lillian? He whispered, his voice raw from coughing. The name hit Evelyn like a physical blow. She knew fever caused confusion, knew he wasn't truly seeing her, but hearing him call for his dead wife while fighting the same disease that had killed her felt like a preview of loss she couldn't bear. It's Evelyn, she said gently, taking his hand. Lillian's gone, Cole. But I'm here. I'm right here. And I'm not leaving. But Cole's eyes had already unfocused, his mind slipping back into fever dreams. Lillian, don't go. Please don't go. The baby, we were going to name the baby Sarah if she was a girl, remember? You wanted Sarah. I should have been there. Should have stayed. Should have... His words dissolved into coughing that racked his whole body. Evelyn held him through it, her heart breaking for the guilt he'd carried 15 years. For the loss that had shaped him, for the fear he must have felt that history was repeating itself. When the coughing finally subsided and he collapsed back against the pillows, unconscious again, Evelyn let herself cry. Silent tears that ran down her face while she continued bathing his fevered skin, while she monitored his breathing, while she prayed to whatever forces might be listening that this man would survive. You can't have him, she whispered into the darkness. I know I don't get to decide. I know life doesn't work that way, but I'm asking anyway. You can't have him. He's survived too much, carried too much, built too much to die now. And her voice broke. I need him. My boys need him. This ranch needs him. So please let him fight this off. Please let him live. The third day brought no improvement. Cole's fever remained dangerously high. His breathing labored, his periods of consciousness growing shorter and more confused. The doctor came again, examined him with grave concern, offered no reassurances. His lungs are filling with fluid, he said quietly to Evelyn and Mrs. Whitlow. If we can't keep him breathing through the night, if pneumonia takes full hold, there's nothing more I can do. I'm sorry. After he left, Mrs. Whitlow found Evelyn sitting on the floor outside Cole's room, her head in her hands, finally giving in to the fear and exhaustion that had been building for days. I can't do this again, Evelyn said, her voice muffled. I can't watch another man I love die. I can't survive losing him, Alma. I just can't. The older woman sat beside her on the hard floor, put an arm around her shoulders. You can. You're stronger than you know, but you won't have to because Cole's going to fight this. He's survived 15 years of grief and loneliness. He's not going to die right when he finally has something to live for. You don't know that. You can't promise that. No, I can't. But I know Cole, and I know he's stubborn as a mule when something matters. And you matter, Evelyn. Those boys matter. This life you're building together matters. That's going to carry him through. That night, Evelyn sent the boys to stay with the Henderson family, not wanting them to witness what might come. Then she settled in for what she knew could be Cole's final hours, determined that if he died, at least he wouldn't die alone. Around midnight, his breathing changed, became more labored, more desperate, punctuated by coughing that brought up blood-tinged phlegm that terrified her. She was reaching for the bell to summon help when Cole's eyes opened, fully conscious for the first time in days. Evelyn. Her name came out as barely more than breath. I'm here. She took his hand, felt how weak his grip had become. The doctor says you need to keep fighting. You need to keep breathing, keep pushing through this. Tired, he whispered. So tired of fighting. I know, but you can't stop now. You can't leave me, Cole. You promised me a life together. You promised my boys a father. You don't get to break those promises because you're tired. Something flickered in his fever-bright eyes. Recognition, maybe, or stubbornness. Not fair. Using promises. Nothing about this is fair, but I'm asking anyway, stay, fight, live, because I love you and I need you, and I'm not ready to let you go. Cole's eyes drifted closed, and for a terrible moment Evelyn thought she'd lost him. But then he squeezed her hand with what little strength he had left. Not leaving, he breathed. Not when I just found you, not when... Coughing interrupted him, violent and prolonged. Evelyn supported him through it, wiping blood from his lips when it finally subsided. Don't talk, just breathe, just keep breathing. That's all you have to do right now. She stayed with him through that long night, monitoring every breath, celebrating every moment he continued fighting. And somewhere in the darkest hours before dawn, when his fever finally began to break and his breathing eased slightly, Evelyn understood something she'd been too afraid to acknowledge. She loved this man completely, not tentatively, not with reservations or careful boundaries, but with the full force of a heart that had learned love wasn't about protecting yourself, but about risking everything for connection that mattered. And if he died despite her love, despite his fighting, despite everything, well, at least she'd have known what it felt like to love someone this deeply, this honestly, this completely. But Cole didn't die. As dawn light filtered through the window, his fever continued dropping. His breathing stabilized. His eyes opened with real consciousness behind them. You're still here, he said, his voice rough but clear. Where else would I be? Evelyn's relief was so profound she felt dizzy with it. Thought I was dreaming. Thought I'd lost you like I lost... He stopped, understanding flooding his features. I called you Lillian, didn't I? In the fever. You did. It's all right, Cole, I understand. No. He struggled to sit up, frustrated when weakness prevented it. It's not all right. You're not her, Evelyn. You're you, and you deserve better than being confused with a ghost I've been mourning for 15 years. Evelyn helped him settle back against the pillows, her hand gentle on his chest. You were delirious with fever and fighting the same disease that killed her. Of course your mind went there. I'm not hurt by it, Cole. I'm just grateful you're alive to explain it. Cole was quiet for a moment, studying her face with an intensity that suggested he was seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time since falling ill. I thought I was dying. Thought I'd never get to marry you, never get to be a father to your boys, never get to build the life we'd planned. And all I could think was how unfair it was, that I'd finally found someone worth living for, and I wasn't going to survive long enough to prove I deserved you. You don't have to prove anything to me. Evelyn's voice was fierce. You've already shown me who you are through every action, every choice, every promise kept. And now you've fought off influenza through sheer stubbornness because you're too contrary to die when I've explicitly asked you not to. That's all the proof I need. A ghost of a smile crossed Cole's face. Too contrary to die? I'll take that as a compliment. You should. It's the highest compliment I know, that you're stubborn enough to fight for what matters instead of giving up when things get hard. Over the following week, Cole's recovery was slow but steady. The doctor pronounced him out of danger, though weak enough that he'd need several weeks of rest before returning to full work. The ranch hands stepped up without complaint, running operations smoothly under Marcus and James's capable management, and Evelyn divided her time between teaching, helping Mrs. Whitlow, and sitting with Cole as he regained strength. It was during one of those quiet afternoons, with Cole propped up in bed and actually following doctor's orders for once, that he finally spoke about what his illness had forced him to confront. I need to tell you about Lillian, he said, without preamble. Really tell you, not just the facts, but the truth underneath. Evelyn set aside the mending she'd been working on, gave him her full attention. All right. Cole looked out the window at the ranch spreading under August sun, gathering words that clearly didn't come easy. I loved her, but I also failed her. I was 25 years old and full of ambition and certainty that I knew how to build a good life. She was 19 and trusted me to make the right decisions. And I decided we needed money more than we needed me home. So I took that cattle drive even though she was pregnant and scared and asked me to stay. His voice roughened with old guilt. I was gone 6 weeks. She died after 2. And for 15 years I've carried the knowledge that if I just stayed, if I just listened to her fear instead of dismissing it as women's nerves, she might have survived. Someone would have been there to get the doctor sooner, to care for her properly, to... He stopped, swallowed hard. To not leave her alone when she needed me most. Evelyn moved to sit on the edge of the bed, took his hand. You couldn't have known, Cole. You made what seemed like a reasonable decision with the information you had. Maybe, but it was still the wrong decision, and she paid for it with her life. Our baby paid for it. And I've spent 15 years trying to build something that couldn't die on me because I was terrified of caring about anything I couldn't control. He turned to face her directly. Then you arrived, and your boys arrived, and suddenly I had something to care about that I absolutely cannot control. I can't control whether you get sick, or whether accidents happen, or whether life decides to take you away from me. And when I got sick, when I felt myself slipping toward the same disease that killed Lillian, all those fears came roaring back. The fear that I'd fail you like I failed her. The fear that loving you was just setting myself up for more loss. The fear that I don't deserve happiness because I made choices that cost someone else everything. Evelyn let him finish, let all the guilt and fear spill out into the quiet room. Then she spoke, her voice steady with certainty. Cole, you didn't fail Lillian. You made a choice that had tragic consequences you couldn't have predicted. That's not failure. That's just the terrible randomness of life. And carrying that guilt for 15 years doesn't honor her memory. It just punishes you for something you couldn't control. She squeezed his hand firmly. As for failing me, you haven't and you won't. Not because you're perfect or because you can control what happens, but because you show up. You keep promises. You fight for what matters instead of running when things get hard. That's all anyone can do, Cole. That's all I'm asking you to do. What if something happens to you? What if I lose you the way I lost her? Then you'll grieve, and you'll survive, and you'll keep living because that's what people do. But Cole, you can't refuse to love because you're afraid of loss. That's not protection. That's just a different kind of death. A slower one, maybe, but just as final. Cole was quiet for a long moment, absorbing her words. When he finally spoke again, his voice carried a different quality, lighter, freer, as if some burden had been lifted. When I was fevered, calling for Lillian, you said you weren't leaving, that you were right there and you weren't leaving. I remember. That's what I need you to understand, Evelyn. I'm not leaving either. Not willingly, not if I have any say in it. I'm going to fight for this life we're building with everything I have. And if something happens anyway, if fate or illness or accident takes one of us despite our fighting, at least we'll have lived fully instead of held back by fear. Evelyn felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they were different tears than the ones she'd cried during his illness. These were tears of release, of resolution, of two people finally putting down burdens they'd carried too long. So we're doing this, she said, really doing this. Building a life together without guarantees or certainty or any promise it'll work out perfectly. We're really doing this. Cole pulled her closer, his strength returning enough for the gesture to feel solid, real. End of August, under the cottonwoods in front of everyone who matters. I'm going to marry you, Evelyn Mercer, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. You already have, Evelyn whispered against his shoulder. You already have. The final weeks before the wedding passed in a different kind of anticipation than before. Cole's illness had stripped away pretense and careful boundaries, had forced them both to confront fears they'd been avoiding. What remained was stronger for the testing, more honest for the vulnerability. By the third week of August, Cole was back on his feet, still weaker than usual but determined to be fully himself for the wedding. The ranch buzzed with preparation, tables built, food prepared, decorations fashioned from wildflowers and pine boughs. The boys were fitted for new clothes by Mrs. Whitlow, who grumbled about the expense while secretly delighting in making them look presentable. And Evelyn, with help from the ranch women, created a wedding dress from fabric Cole had ordered special from Denver. Simple cream cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Nothing fancy, but well-made and beautiful in its simplicity. The night before the wedding, Evelyn sat with her sons in their cabin, the four of them together as they'd been through so much hardship and uncertainty. Tomorrow changes everything, she told them gently. Tomorrow, Mr. Granger becomes part of our family officially. Are you boys ready for that? Will he be our pa? Nate asked, his 6-year-old face serious. If you want him to be. You can call him whatever feels right, Mr. Granger, Cole, pa. He'll answer to anything as long as you know he cares about you. I want to call him pa, Toby announced. He taught me to whistle, and he lets me feed the chickens, and he's nice. Caleb, as always, thought more deeply before speaking. I remember our real pa, but I also remember being scared and hungry and not knowing if we'd be all right. Mr. Granger, Cole, he makes us not scared anymore. So I think maybe we can have two fathers, one we remember and one we live with. That seems fair. Evelyn gathered all three boys close, her heart full of gratitude for their resilience, their wisdom, their willingness to embrace this new chapter. That seems very fair, sweetheart. Very fair indeed. That night, lying alone in the cabin for the last time as Evelyn Mercer, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From that desperate night outside the general store to this moment of hope and certainty. From survival to thriving. From fear to trust. Tomorrow, she would marry Cole Granger under open sky with the community watching. Tomorrow, she would become part of something larger than herself. Would build a future based on partnership and respect and hard-won faith in good things. Tomorrow, she would finally stop running and start truly living. And that, she thought as sleep finally claimed her, was worth every fear she'd faced to get here. The morning of the wedding arrived with that particular clarity that August sometimes brings to the high country. Air so clean it seemed to magnify every detail, sky so blue it hurt to look at directly. Sunlight turning the cottonwood leaves to coins of dancing gold. Evelyn woke early, her stomach tight with nerves that had nothing to do with doubt, and everything to do with the magnitude of the day. She was marrying Cole Granger, building a permanent life on the Lazy G, giving her sons a father and herself a partner. Choosing hope over fear, trust over protection, living over mere survival. Mrs. Whitlow arrived at the cabin before the boys had fully wakened, carrying a basket of breakfast and a determined expression. No bride of mine is getting married on an empty stomach or with her hair in a tangle. Sit, eat, then we'll make you beautiful." The morning passed in a blur of preparation. The boys were scrubbed and dressed in their new clothes, their hair slicked down with water that would last maybe an hour before their natural wildness reasserted itself. Mrs. Whitlow worked on Evelyn's hair with surprising gentleness, braiding and pinning it into something elegant but natural, weaving in small white flowers that Nate had picked that morning. The dress fit perfectly, the cream cotton soft against Evelyn's skin, the embroidery at collar and cuffs catching the light. Looking at herself in the small mirror, Evelyn barely recognized the woman staring back. Not the desperate widow who'd arrived with $20 and 3 frightened children, but someone stronger, more certain, ready to build rather than just survive. "You're beautiful," Mrs. Whitlow said quietly, her sharp eyes suspiciously bright. "Cole's a lucky man." "I'm the lucky one," Evelyn corrected. "He gave us a chance when no one else would. He gave you work. You earned everything else." Mrs. Whitlow adjusted the dress one final time. "Now, the ceremony starts at 3. That gives you time to settle your nerves and remember that this is the beginning of something good, not the end of anything that mattered." By 2:30, guests had begun gathering under the cottonwoods behind the main house. Ranch families, neighboring ranchers, townspeople from Willow Creek who'd heard about the wedding and wanted to witness it. Even the doctor had come, looking pleased with his patient's recovery and the happiness it had enabled. Cole stood near the makeshift altar, just a simple wooden arch that Marcus and James had built and decorated with pine boughs and wildflowers, talking quietly with old Joe, who'd agreed to serve as witness along with Mrs. Whitlow. He wore his best suit, dark and well-fitted, his hair trimmed and his face clean-shaven. But it was his expression that made Evelyn's breath catch when she finally saw him from the cabin porch, a mixture of joy and relief and wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe this was happening either. "Mama, are you ready?" Caleb appeared at her elbow, solemn in his responsibility as eldest. "Everyone's waiting." Evelyn took a deep breath, looked at her 3 sons standing before her in their new clothes, their faces bright with excitement, and the particular happiness of children who finally felt secure. "I'm ready. Are you boys ready?" "We made something," Caleb said, his voice careful. "For the ceremony. For you and Cole. Can we show you?" He pulled from his pocket 3 small objects that made Evelyn's throat tighten with emotion. Rings, rough, handmade, fashioned from what looked like copper wire and polished smooth. Each was slightly different in size, clearly made by different hands, but all carried the same intent. "We didn't have money to buy anything nice," Caleb explained, "but old Joe showed us how to make these. He said in the old days, people made their own rings when they got married, and it meant more because they put work into them. So we made one for you, and one for Cole, and one that's from all of us together." Nate stepped forward with his contribution. "Mine's for Cole is, because he's going to be our PO now, and we wanted to give him something that shows we want him." "And mine's for you, Mama," Toby added, his 4-year-old voice proud, "because you're the best mama and you deserve pretty things, even if we can't buy them." Evelyn knelt carefully to avoid crushing her dress, looking at these rings her sons had labored over, these symbols of acceptance and love and family that meant more than any purchased jewelry ever could. "They're perfect, absolutely perfect. And we'll use them in the ceremony, all right? We'll make them part of our promises to each other." The walk from the cabin to the cottonwoods felt both endless and too short. The assembled guests turned to watch, their faces warm with genuine happiness. The fiddle player began a simple melody, and Cole's eyes found Evelyn across the distance, his expression transforming with a joy so pure it made everything that had brought them to this moment, the hardship, the fear, the loss, the uncertainty, seem like necessary steps on a path that could only have led here. When Evelyn reached the altar, when she stood facing Cole with their community gathered around them, and her son standing close, when she saw in his face the same mixture of wonder and certainty she felt herself, she understood something profound. This wasn't a rescue. This wasn't salvation from desperate circumstances. This was 2 people who'd both survived loss and grief, choosing to build something new together, something based not on need but on mutual respect and earned trust and the courage to believe in good things again. Old Joe, in his capacity as witness and unofficial officiant since Willow Creek's minister couldn't make the journey, cleared his throat and spoke with surprising eloquence. We're gathered here today to witness the joining of Cole Granger and Evelyn Mercer in marriage. Now, I'm no preacher, but I've known Cole for 20 years and I've watched Evelyn these past months. And I can tell you this is a match built on solid ground. These two have both known loss, both known hardship, both learned that life doesn't promise easy or fair. But they've also both learned to keep going anyway, to build something worth having even when it's hard, to trust that good things can happen if you're brave enough to reach for them. He paused, looking between them with eyes that had seen decades of frontier life. Cole, do you take Evelyn to be your wife? To stand beside her in good times and hard times? To be a partner to her and a father to her boys? To build a life together based on honesty and respect? I do. Cole's voice was steady, certain. With everything I have, I do. Evelyn, do you take Cole to be your husband? To stand beside him in good times and hard times? To be a partner to him and build a home together? To trust that what you're creating is worth the risk of hoping again? I do. Evelyn's voice matched his certainty. With everything I am, I do. Then let's have the rings. This was the moment Evelyn had planned with the boys. Caleb stepped forward with the ring they'd made for Cole, his young face serious with the weight of the gesture. Cole, this ring is from me and Nate and Toby. It's not fancy, but we made it ourselves to show that we want you to be our PA for real, not just because Mama's marrying you. We want you to be family. Cole took the rough copper ring with hands that trembled slightly, and Evelyn saw tears shine in his eyes before he blinked them away. I'd be honored to be your pa, boys, all three of you. And I promise I'll be the kind of father who stays, who keeps his word, who makes you feel safe and valued every single day. He slipped the ring onto his finger. It fit imperfectly, too loose on one knuckle and tight on another, but Cole adjusted it with care and looked at it like it was the finest gold. I'll wear this always, as a reminder that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice and commitment and showing up for the people who matter. Nate presented his ring to Evelyn with equal solemnity. This one's for you, Mama, to show we're happy you found someone good, someone who makes you smile again. Evelyn accepted the ring with a kiss to her son's forehead, slipped it onto her finger beside the silver band Cole had given her during his proposal. Thank you, sweetheart, for this and for being so brave through everything we've been through together. Finally, Toby held up the third ring, the one meant to represent all of them together. This one's for both of you, he announced, his 4-year-old voice carrying to the assembled crowd, because now we're all one family. Cole and Evelyn each touched the ring, holding it between them while old Joe spoke the final words. By the power of community witness and honest intention, I declare you married. Cole, you may kiss your bride. The kiss was gentle but firm, a promise and a beginning both. The assembled guests erupted in applause and cheers. The boys whooped with delight, and somewhere in the celebration, Evelyn felt something shift inside her, a final letting go of fear, a complete embrace of this new life she'd chosen. The celebration that followed was everything Mrs. Whitlow had promised and more. Tables groaned under food contributions from every ranch family, roasted meat and fresh bread, vegetable dishes and fruit preserves, cakes and pies in quantities that suggested the community had been saving sugar for weeks. The fiddle player was joined by a guitar player from a neighboring ranch, and soon music filled the evening air. Cole and Evelyn danced the first dance, slightly awkward because neither was practiced at such things, but genuine in their happiness. Then the boys cut in, each demanding a turn with their mother, their new father, showing off the dance steps old Joe had secretly been teaching them for weeks. As sunset painted the sky orange and purple, Marcus and James raised glasses to toast the new couple. To Cole, Marcus said, his voice carrying across the crowd, who taught us that a boss can be fair and firm both, who paid our wages when we couldn't work, who offered partnership when he could have kept all the profit himself. You've built more than a ranch here, boss. You've built a community where people matter as much as cattle. We're honored to be part of it, James added his own words. And to Mrs. Granger, Evelyn, who came here with nothing and earned everything, who taught our children and helped our families and showed us all what courage looks like when it's wrapped in quiet determination instead of loud declarations. You've made this ranch a home instead of just a workplace. Thank you for that." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes for what felt like the 100th time that day. But these were tears of gratitude, of belonging, of understanding that she'd found not just a husband, but a whole community that had decided she mattered. The celebration continued into full darkness, lit by lanterns and a bonfire that sent sparks spiraling up toward the stars. Children ran wild with the particular joy of being allowed to stay up past bedtime. Adults talked and laughed and told stories. And through it all, Cole and Evelyn moved together, hosts and participants both, receiving congratulations and well wishes from people who'd watched their courtship and approved of its foundation in respect and honest dealing. It was near midnight when the last guests finally departed, when the ranch families returned to their homes, when Mrs. Whitlow shooed the exhausted boys off to sleep in the main house guest room so the new couple could have their wedding night in peace. Alone finally in Cole's bedroom, their bedroom now, Evelyn stood at the window looking out over the ranch while Cole banked the fire and turned down the lamps. The lazy G spread out in moonlight and shadow, familiar now in ways it hadn't been 7 months ago when she'd first arrived desperate and afraid. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked, coming to stand behind her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I'm thinking about that night outside the general store. How scared I was. How certain I was that we wouldn't survive, that Samuel's rejection was just the first in a series of doors that would close until we had nowhere left to go." She turned to face him. "And I'm thinking about how wrong I was. How that night wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of everything that matters now." Cole pulled her close, and she fit against him with the ease of long practice, though their marriage was mere hours old. "You survived because you're strong, Evelyn. You would have found a way even if I hadn't offered help." "Maybe, but it wouldn't have been this way. It wouldn't have been partnership and respect and building something together. It would have been scraping by, surviving but not thriving, keeping my boys alive but not giving them a real home." She looked up at him. "You gave us more than shelter, Cole. You gave us dignity, the chance to earn our place instead of accepting charity. That's a gift I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful for. And you gave me something I'd stopped believing was possible. You gave me family, purpose beyond just work, a reason to hope again instead of just endure." His voice roughened with emotion. "I love you, Evelyn Granger. Not because you needed me or because I was lonely, but because you're brave and fierce and tender, and being around you makes me want to be better than I thought I could be." They made love that night with the tenderness of people who understood that intimacy was about vulnerability as much as passion, about trust as much as desire. And afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Evelyn felt a peace she'd never known, the peace of being exactly where she belonged, with exactly who she belonged with, building exactly the life she'd stopped believing she deserved. The weeks that followed settled into new rhythms. Evelyn moved her belongings into the main house, though they kept the cabin for guests and eventually as additional housing for the growing ranch operation. The boys adapted to their expanded home with enthusiasm, claiming bedrooms and exploring spaces with the confidence of children who finally felt secure. School started again in September, and Evelyn returned to teaching with renewed energy. But now there were changes. Cole had expanded the classroom, added more books, arranged for a proper blackboard and individual desks. Education mattered to him, he explained, because educated children became capable adults who could build on what their parents started instead of just repeating the same struggles. By October, Marcus and James had formalized their partnership, taking over management of an expanded cattle operation that allowed Cole to focus on other aspects of ranch development. Their success brought other changes, new families moving to the area, new children joining Evelyn's school, the Lazy G becoming known not just as a profitable ranch, but as a good place to work, a fair place to build a life. And in late October, Evelyn noticed the first signs that sent her to the doctor in Willow Creek with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The confirmation came with the doctor's pleased smile and practical advice about rest and nutrition and managing the pregnancy carefully given her age and previous difficult births. She told Cole that evening, finding him in the barn checking on a mare about to foal. He looked up when she entered, his expression shifting to concern when he saw her face. "What's wrong? Are you all right?" "I'm fine. Better than fine." She took his hand, placed it gently on her still flat stomach. "I'm pregnant, Cole. We're going to have a baby." The joy that flooded his features was so complete, so unguarded, that Evelyn saw straight through to the young man he'd been before loss had taught him to protect his heart. "A baby. We're having a baby. Are you happy?" She asked it knowing the answer, but needing to hear it anyway. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He pulled her close, careful already of her condition. Terrified, honestly. After what happened with Lillian, after losing her and the baby both, I thought I'd never risk this again. But Evelyn, with you, I want to risk it. I want this child and whatever else life brings us, even knowing it might hurt, because the alternative is refusing to fully live. He pulled back enough to look at her seriously. "We'll do this right. You'll rest when you need to rest. We'll have the doctor check you regularly, and if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you tell me immediately. Promise me." "I promise." Evelyn touched his face gently. "But Cole, you need to promise me something too. Promise me you won't spend the next 7 months terrified that history will repeat itself. Promise me you'll let yourself be excited and hopeful and believe that good things can happen without tragedy following." Cole was quiet for a moment, wrestling with fears that had roots 15 years deep. Finally, he nodded. "I'll try. I'll try to trust that this time will be different, that we'll both come through this safely, that our child will be born healthy and whole. It won't be easy, but I'll try. That's all I ask." They told the boys that night over supper, watching their reactions range from Toby's confused questions about where babies came from, to Nate's excited calculations about when he'd be a big brother, to Caleb's more measured but genuine happiness. "Will you still have time for us?" Caleb asked quietly later when his brothers had gone to bed. "When the baby comes, I mean. Will you still be our mama the same way?" Evelyn pulled him close, this serious boy who'd carried too much responsibility too young. "Always, sweetheart. Having another child doesn't divide my love. It just means my heart grows bigger to hold everyone. You three will always be my first babies, my brave boys who survived so much with me. Nothing changes that." "Good." Caleb relaxed against her. "Because I like it here. I like having a pa and a home and knowing where we'll be next year. I don't want things to change too much." "The important things won't change," Evelyn promised. "We'll just add to them." Winter came early that year, blanketing the Lazy G in snow by mid-November. But unlike the previous winter, when Evelyn had been new and uncertain and still half expecting disaster, this winter felt secure. The cabin was warm, the pantry was full, the ranch was profitable and well managed. And Evelyn moved through the days with the particular satisfaction of someone who'd earned what she had, instead of simply receiving it. Her pregnancy progressed normally despite Cole's persistent worry. The doctor visited monthly, pronounced her healthy, predicted a spring baby. Mrs. Whitlow took charge of preparing everything needed, sewing tiny clothes, organizing the nursery, making sure Evelyn rested adequately despite her tendency to overwork. Christmas arrived with its own magic. Cole had arranged for a pine tree to be cut and brought to the house, and the boys decorated it with strings of popcorn and paper ornaments they'd made in school. Presents were modest but meaningful. New books for the children, a warm shawl for Evelyn, a carved pipe for Cole that old Joe had made, small tokens that represented thought and care more than expense. But the real gift came after the presents were opened, after the special Christmas dinner was consumed, after the guests had departed and just the family remained in the quiet house. Cole gathered everyone in the sitting room, his expression serious. "I have something for each of you," he said, pulling out official-looking papers. "These are adoption documents. If you boys agree, if you want it, I want to legally adopt you as my sons. Make you Grangers officially, not just in feeling, but in law. You'd still be Thomas Mercer's sons, too. We're not erasing that. But you'd also be mine. Caleb Granger, Nate Granger, Toby Granger. What do you think?" The boys looked at each other, that silent communication passing between them. Then Caleb, as spokesman, answered for all three. "We'd like that. We'd like to be really yours, not just living here. And I think our first pa would like it too. He'd want us to have a father who stays, who keeps us safe. So yes, we want to be Grangers." The papers were signed that evening, with Mrs. Whitlow and old Joe serving as witnesses. and Evelyn watched her sons become legal members of the family they had already claimed in their hearts, watched Cole accept the responsibility and joy of fatherhood with the same steady commitment he brought to everything, and felt gratitude so profound it threatened to overwhelm her. New Year's Day, 1880, arrived with clear skies and bitter cold. Evelyn, now visibly pregnant and relegated to light duties by everyone's insistence, sat in the main house watching her sons play in the snow, while Cole and the hands worked on winter repairs that couldn't wait for warmer weather. She thought about where they'd been a year ago, desperate, afraid, uncertain of survival. And she thought about where they were now, safe, loved, building a future that felt solid and real. The transformation seemed impossible, miraculous, except she knew it wasn't either of those things. It was simply the result of courage meeting opportunity, of hard work meeting fair dealing, of two people choosing to trust despite every reason not to. Spring returned gradually, melting the snow and turning the ranch roads to mud, and bringing with it the new life that always followed winter. Calves were born in the pastures, the stream ran high with runoff, and in early April, on a morning when the cottonwoods were just beginning to bud, Evelyn went into labor. Cole sent for the doctor immediately, his face pale with barely controlled fear. Mrs. Whitlow took charge of the household, keeping the boys occupied and calm, and Evelyn labored through the day and into the evening, focusing on breathing and pushing and trusting that her body knew what to do. The baby arrived just after sunset, a daughter, healthy and loud, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced her displeasure at being born into a cold world. The doctor pronounced her perfect, handed her to Evelyn with satisfied efficiency, and began the practical work of ensuring the mother's recovery. Cole stood frozen in the doorway, his face working through emotions too complex to name. The doctor, understanding, nodded permission for him to approach. Cole moved to the bedside like a man in a dream, his eyes fixed on the tiny bundle in Evelyn's arms. "A daughter," Evelyn said softly, exhaustion and joy mixing in her voice. "We have a daughter, Cole." "She's breathing." The words came out rough, choked. "She's alive and breathing and perfect." Evelyn shifted the baby so Cole could see her better. "Your daughter, our daughter." Cole reached out with trembling hands, touched the baby's tiny fingers with wonder. "I thought I'd lost you both. Thought history was repeating, but it didn't. We're both fine. She's fine. You're allowed to be happy now, Cole. You're allowed to believe that good things can last." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, his arm around Evelyn, his eyes never leaving the baby's face. "What should we name her?" Evelyn had thought about this, had considered it carefully during the long winter months. "I think we should name her Sarah. The name you chose 15 years ago for the daughter you lost. Because that baby deserved to be remembered, and this baby deserves a name that honors both the past and the future." Cole's eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. "Sarah, yes, Sarah Granger." The boys were allowed in shortly after, their excitement barely contained by Mrs. Whitlow's stern instructions to be gentle. They clustered around the bed, staring at their new sister with awe and tentative affection. "She's so small," Nate breathed. "Can I hold her?" Under careful supervision, each boy got a turn holding Sarah, their young faces serious with the responsibility. And watching them, her 3 sons and her new daughter and her husband who'd learned to hope again, Evelyn felt completeness that had nothing to do with perfection and everything to do with hard-won joy. The weeks that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Sarah proved to be a good baby, nursing well and sleeping in reasonable stretches. The boys adapted to having a sister with varying degrees of helpfulness, and Cole moved through the days with a lightness he'd never shown before, as if Sarah's safe arrival had finally freed him from 15 years of guilt and grief. By summer, Sarah was thriving, gaining weight, and meeting every milestone the doctor checked for. Evelyn had returned to teaching part-time, with Mrs. Whitlow delighted to watch the baby during school hours, and the ranch continued its steady expansion, new families joining the community, new opportunities emerging from the foundation of fair dealing and honest work. On a warm June evening, Evelyn stood on the porch of the main house holding Sarah while watching her sons play in the yard with the children of other ranch families. Cole came up behind her, his arms circling both his wife and daughter, his presence solid and warm. "Happy?" he asked, the question simple but weighted with meaning. more than I ever thought possible. Evelyn leaned back against him. Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life, that we survived everything that tried to break us and came out stronger for it. We didn't just survive, Cole corrected gently. We built something that lasts, something worth fighting for, something that proves good things can happen when courage meets opportunity and trust meets fair dealing. Sarah made a small sound, and they both looked down at her. This perfect combination of both of them, this symbol of second chances and new beginnings. In the yard, Caleb called for his brothers to come see something he'd found. The sun slanted golden across the ranch, painting everything in warm light. "This is home," Evelyn said quietly. "Really, truly home. Not just a place we're surviving in, but a life we've built together. A family we've created. A future we've earned." "This is home," Cole agreed, "and it always will be." They stood together as evening deepened into twilight, watching their sons play and holding their daughter, and feeling the deep satisfaction of people who'd risked everything for the possibility of joy and found it exceeded their wildest hopes. The journey from that desperate night in Willow Creek to this moment of peace had been hard, had tested them both in ways they couldn't have anticipated. But they'd survived. More than survived, they'd thrived. They'd built a marriage based on partnership instead of rescue, a family based on choice instead of just circumstance, a life based on earned trust instead of blind hope. And standing there on the porch of the Lazy G Ranch, with her husband's arms around her and her children's laughter filling the air, Evelyn understood that this was what second chances looked like when you were brave enough to reach for them. Not perfect, not easy, but real and solid and worth every moment of fear it had taken to build. This was home. This was family. This was the life she'd stopped believing possible on that cold February night when every door had closed and the future had seemed impossible. And it was everything.